Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of All on the Table for GameItAll.com, your one-stop shop for all your gaming and entertainment and video gaming and entertainment needs. Visit GameItAll.com. Of course, All on the Table is sponsored by Comic Hunter, Moncton and Charlottetown. Go to their website at comichunter.net and get some great deals on Magic singles and used and old comic books dating back to the Golden Age, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah, some great stuff. I'm Phatter Phil, of course, and with me this week is, from the Comic Hunter, is Jeff. He will be our new co-host. Fat Adam may join us again in the future, but for now, he's moved on to other projects. So this week on All on the Table, after last week's hiatus, we're going to be presenting generic RPG games. And they're a lot of fun because they're nice and freeform. You can do a lot with it. You know, it's any setting you want.
Yes.
So the first one we're going to talk about here is we talked about it a little bit when we covered Deadlands. This one's called Savage Worlds. This is what the core book looks like for the latest edition of the rules, which I believe is fourth. I don't know, they just call it Explorers.
Yeah.
But I think it's the fourth edition of the game. So Savage Worlds is a very easy RPG. It's like one of the most easiest to learn generic RPGs, I'd say, because the system's really, really easy. It's a point-buy system. You've got your character sheet here. Your pretty little character sheet right over here. And you'll see there's a whole bunch of different die types and stuff. So what the die types mean is a point-based system. So you get so many points for your stats. I believe it's 5 points for your stats. All your stats start at a four-sided die, a D4. Mm-hmm. And then if you put 1 point in, you then increase it one die type.
Yes. So a D4 goes to a D6, a D6 goes to a D8, etc.
Yeah, and you only have 5 points within your 5 stats to make them better. Your 5 stats are agility, smart, strength, spirit, and vigor. Pretty straightforward. In Savage Worlds, they do have a set amount of skills. They do have like set skills that are created in the book, like firearms or driving or athletics and things like that. But the thing about Savage Worlds that makes it really cool is if you want a specific skill, you and the GM can just create it. So you know, and you can increase that skill the same way you do with the stats. You just put more points into it and get more.
Yeah, and with the stats, or not the stats, sorry, the abilities, they are all linked to one of your stats. And you can, when you gain so much XP, you can say, all right, I will raise 2 abilities, each by 1 level, up to the limit of your stats. So, for example, just we'll say fighting is agility.
Yeah.
And your agility is a D8. And you can say you can have your fighting at a 6, which means you would be rolling a D6 for if you're using the actual fighting skill. And when you level up, or when you get 5 XP, you can say, all right, I want to put in 2 stats or 2 abilities, and fighting is 1, so that upgrades your fighting skill from a D6 to a D8. Generally, it goes up to the limit of what your ability is. You can exceed it. However, instead of bumping up by your 2 abilities doing that, you can only bump up 1 ability. So once your stats are high enough that you feel they're going to be the way it is, then when you're bumping up your abilities or your skills, then it sort of restricts it, so you're not totally min-maxing all your abilities, and when you're getting your XP, you're not dumping it all into your abilities and none into your actual stats.
Yeah, it really helps govern it all. And it makes sense. I mean, you know, if you're not a weightlifter or someone who engages in strength-based activity, what's the point of increasing a strength-based skill, you know? Like, you're not going to be able to fucking hammer throw if you don't fucking increase your strength. It'll be really much harder for you to learn it on skill alone.
Yeah. And when you make your, like, you generally have your idea, this is what my character is going to be, and you can. It does allow a little bit of leeway to say, all right, early on in the campaign, this because you can bump up your stats. You're like, well, having someone that's very intelligence based isn't really helping me a lot in fighting situations, so I should bump up my agility. And there are rules regarding that. So, like, every time you get 5 XP total, because every gaming session, depending on what the GM decides, you get 2, maybe 3 XP. And then every increment of 5, you can then either like bump up a stat, bump up 2 of your skills, add a new skill, or add in an edge, which is close to like a feat or something like that.
Edges are special abilities that your characters get in Savage Worlds that let you do fantastic things. So, like, if you're a mad scientist, you would get the mad science edge. If you're a wizard, you would get the arcane edge, which lets you access wizard spells and things of the sort. So the system is incredibly freeform, and because it's always like 5 XP for your next advancement, it makes it really easy to judge your character. And the game doesn't really have levels per se. It just has like a certain threshold that you reach when you've had so many of these 5 experience points advancements. And when you finally become like the top advancement threshold, which is legendary, you can do some pretty amazing things. Because like we ran a Deadlands game which uses Savage Worlds, and the characters at the end of it were ungodly. There's almost nothing that could stop them. Well, you needed the big bads of the setting to really give them any kind of trouble.
And some of the edges, when you get a certain level, like he was saying, legendary, there's heroic, novice, what have you. Some of the edges you cannot get until you achieve one of those areas. So that way you're not grabbing the really powerful stuff early and of course then breaking everything. Another thing that he was saying about this was you can put in any sort of environment, and the book itself actually does a really good job covering, in broad strokes, covering the different genres: fantasy, modern day,
horror, steampunk,
future tech. They do have specialty books as well. The one that this is for fantasy. This is one that's the Deadlands, the Wild West one that
those ones are setting specific, but you have genre specific. So there's like the fantasy one which he showed you. There's a horror one that's actually pretty good. This one is a superpowers companion. So it's basically like if you want to do a superpowers game, like a heroes game or something like that. This has a variety of powers to help you adapt to the setting without having a specific setting in of itself. Now, the thing about Savage Worlds as well is they like to do some licensed stuff. They have a few companies that they do licensed settings for. Even some famous settings like Thieves of Lankshmar, which has the tales of the fantasy novels with have Fafhert and the Grey Mouser, which are a famous fantasy duo in a bunch of fantasy novels written by someone I don't remember off the top of my head.
The most recent one is based off a comic series that ended recently, Sixth Gun. It's a Western/horror genre. The story itself lasted like 50 issues, but they just about a couple of months ago released books for Savage Worlds that you can play in that actual comic universe. So the characters that are in the comics are major NPCs, but it's, as Phil was saying, it does allow, you can even sort of tweak it yourself, because you could on your own take a setting that you're familiar with and say, oh, okay, well, since we have Savage Worlds and we know how to use for future tech, well, we can do or combine it with a space horror like Aliens, and sort of try and combine those and make it of your own device.
Mm-hmm. And Savage Worlds has some homebrew settings that are exclusive to the game. Most of them will have like this giant Savage Worlds logo, whereas most of the licensed settings will have little ones. This one's called East Texas University. This one's actually pretty cool. Imagine if Buffy the Vampire Slayer took place in a Texas town, and Everyone goes to the university, and you play characters that go to the university, and you have to fight the supernatural. There's also a system in it that lets you adapt a curriculum, and based on what your curriculum is, like what you do in class, gives your characters certain advantages. So if you go to a history class, you'll have bonuses to history rolls and things like that. But the game also encourages your characters to talk in the accents. There's a full lexicon of Texas slang and things like that. It's actually really cool. A nice little setting. Another example, if you're more into the fantasy thing, you have Hellfrost, which is also a Savage Worlds original. Hellfrost is a fantasy setting where it's always cold. Some type of disaster happened, and the entire world is encased in ice, and it's all frost monsters and things like that. Or then you have something kind of like a steampunky type of fantasy setting, like Sundered Skies. Sundered Skies is a world where the entire world is populated by flying islands. There's no land, and there's a bunch of like steampunk magically powered ships that fly through from island to island, and there's pirates and all that stuff. It's really cool as well, but it's another fantasy setting. There's a bunch of fantasy races in it. So yeah, Savage Worlds has a lot to offer, like a lot.
I would say the most impressed thing I am about Savage Worlds is actually the price.
Oh yeah,
the deluxe edition, the first book we showed you, that is pretty much like the book you need to get started with it.
Core.
And it's less than $20.
Yep.
At the store, I think we sell it for $15.
Yep.
But
$14.95. You bought this brand new.
And even like some of the other, like the smaller books are fairly inexpensive. Especially, I mean, my favorite RPG is D&D, but the books to start off with are expensive. And you for something, if you're interested in, you want to try it out, it's a low risk considering the price. If it's because it's a generic system that you can be played in any setting, it's you read it through, you get a good idea, and you're basically just limited on how creative you are.
The steak doesn't look really thick, but it's some high quality meat in here. All right, like the $15 price tag, when I say is a great deal, trust me, this book has a ton of fucking shit in it. Like, you can play a lot of stuff just with this bad boy. Not to mention, like, the Savage Worlds section is just as big as the D&D section, for sure. There's a ton of stuff there.
Yes.
Tons. Like, there's all kinds of supplements. Plus, like, certain settings have had spin-offs. Like, Deadlands has 2 spin-offs. Hell on Earth and Noir, and both of them have tons of books. So... definitely something worth getting into. If I were to rate Savage World on a 5 scale, altogether it'd be 4.5. It's got some clunkiness mechanically. I mean, I don't know about the crit system. Like, it's kind of weird. Basically, how the
exploding dice. Yeah,
like how the system works is when you roll your die, whatever die you get, you roll your die. So let's say you have an 8-sider. Your skill, your stat is an 8-sider. Then you get what's called a wild die. Every roll you make in Savage Worlds gets an extra d6 called a wild die added to it. So you roll the 2 dice. I'm going to try and not make it loud as I possibly can here. It's not bad. Imagine that. And you pick the highest of the 2. In this case, I rolled an 8 and a 6. So an 8 on the 8-sider and a 6 on a 6-sider. You need to reach a minimum target number of 4. So, obviously, if you're rolling a 4-sided die, it's going to be difficult. If you're rolling a 6-sided die, there's only 2 facings on that 6-sider, or 3 facings on that 6-sider. It's a 50-50 chance. And then the higher your die is, the more chance you've got. Now, when you roll maximum, your die explodes. So, exploding means you roll the dice again and you add to the previous number. So since both of them exploded, I don't know which one will reach higher again. So I'll roll them both again. Now the 8-sider rolled a 1 this time, making it a total of 9. But my 6-sider rolled a 4. 6 and 4 is 10. So I'll take my 6-sider and take my 10. Since I hit my target number of 4, and then I made another 4 over it, I have criticaled the roll. depending on what you're doing, it can add a special beneficiary effect. If you're hitting with a weapon, you add an extra 6-sided die to the damage, and things of the sort. So the system's real easy to learn, but I find that it can get crazy real quick, especially if you kind of got if you're lucky,
or vice versa, because the highest your dice can get is a D12. Mm-hmm. There's no D20s involved. But since he said the target number is 4, you're rolling. You could be I'm maxed out my agility, I maxed out my fighting, so I'm rolling a D12 and over 2/3 or a 2, and it's like you're at a point right now where you're fighting
over 2/3 of the time. You're not going to fail.
Yeah.
You're going to hit that number. Sometimes there's difficulties, like the DM can throw like a -2 or a -4, depending on what you're doing to the roll, which kind of mitigates it. Like higher monsters, more powerful monsters will tend to do stuff like that. It tends to use the fear rating a lot. Like if something's intimidating or scary, you make like a fright check, and you get so many negatives to your rolls if you fail the fright check, and things of the sort. But I mean, it's really the only flaw to the system.
Yeah, for me, I mean, the spellcasting's okay too. It works like I like how they take the spellcasting from the fantasy setting and basically reinterpret it in other settings. It's like, well, it's not in the superpowers book, it's not magic. It's just basically your threshold for using your abilities,
your mutant power or whatever.
And I would say, and I agree with you regarding the character creation. Like once you make your character and you start looking at it, you can actually plan ahead and be pretty much, this is what I want to do. And like I said, if you do find yourself being like, oh, I don't like it, as long as you don't have to be doing it super early in the campaign, but you can still tweak it enough so that you're not wasting your character. As for the mechanics, yeah, I would say a little clunky. I don't mind it. But yeah, I would give it a 4, just because I have played it a few times. I haven't played it enough to say, okay, I'm an absolute expert at this. But I mean, I would probably bump it up by another to a 4.5 just because of the cost value. I mean, there is a lot of books, but with that book, really it's all you need. But the others are just more or less fleshing out the campaigns. There are a few books that are here's our adventures pass or campaign books, and for the cost value, like I said, low risk. So if you try it, you don't like it, and there's only the one book. You don't need to have like a game master guide and a bestiary mode or anything like that.
One purchase, all you need, and you'll have tons of fun with it.
And in that small book, it'll actually tell you like how to make your own enemies and what have you, so that they don't have to. So you don't have to research and look it up every time. You can actually, when you prep, you make them out, and it is fairly quick. Like once you're used to making a character, you can make NPCs in probably 10-15 minutes because there's no rolling when you're making your character. It's just like you said, point buy. I'm planning on doing this. Okay, so where I'm going to put it. You're done.
Yep. So yeah, Savage Worlds. I think it's a definite buy. Definite buy. I would give it a solid 4.5. Great stuff. Jeff gives it a 4.5 as well. Go to your local game store. Go to Comic Hunter. Pick it up. Won't regret it. Next game we'll talk about is game I actually used to swear off up until about a year and a half ago. About a year and a half ago, I think, because I first started playing it. No, it was a year ago. I started playing it shortly after Renee's birthday.
I myself have not played it, but the people that I know that do play it swear by it. They love it.
It's good. It's I used to say, oh my God, look at all the books. Look how complex it probably is. But it's really, if that's what's going to stop you, please put that aside and give it at least a shot. The game we're talking about is Gurps. Stands for Generic Universal Role-Playing System, created by Mr. Steve Jackson Steve Jackson, Sean Punch, and David Pulver. Now, unlike other games, Gurps, you could, as a player, just run it with just the character basic set. But to be quite honest, you should get both the campaign and the basic set. The basic set tells you everything you need to make a character. The characters one is everything you need to make a character and make it work. But the campaigns book has the actual combat system and all of the meat and potatoes of it and how it actually works, in critical charts and things like that. So I honestly highly advise getting them both if you're going to get it. They're around $45 each, give or take. So sometimes it's hard to find them. The version I started playing with was 4th edition Gurps, which is the last edition as far as I'm aware.
It's the current edition.
It's the current edition. Now, how Gurps works is it's a point-based system, kind of like Savage Worlds, except the numbers go... It's a numbers thing. So it's like 10, 11, 12, 13, and so forth. The numbers usually don't get any higher than 20 unless there's special circumstances, for stat-wise anyways. The way Gurps works is it's the generic universal role-playing system is exactly that. It's generic. You're building a person from the ground up with the stats and the skills, and based on the setting you're in, the DM then decides, what powers, what abilities you have access to. If you wanted to play something like a different race or something, there's packages that you can get that give you less points at character creation. Usually the points is about 110 at character creation, 110 points that you spend around, and they spend at different rates. So, like, if you wanted to be an elf, your DM might go, okay, well, your racial package for your elf is 70, which off of the 110. So off your 110 points, you lose 70 points, but you get all the bonuses of being an elf. So you get certain stats that you start with, certain abilities that you get right off the get-go, certain advantages and disadvantages that you must have if you are an elf. And then you get the other 40 points to play with and customize your character, so give yourself your new skills or your powers or whatever you want and things like that. And usually the racial packages are determined by your GM because it's his world, right? He gets to choose what elves are like on his world, what dwarves are like, what, I don't know, droids are like. And it is universal. Like the covers of the book have like, there's like a Conan dude, there's like a superhero chick, there's like a dinosaur, and like a weird cybernetic skeleton riding a cybernetic skeleton space dragon. So I guess they wanted to show you just how crazy it can fucking get.
Westworld Fantasy Edition?
Dude, it's in space. It ain't cowboys. It's in space.
Oh, and also regarding the books, even like he was saying, there's a lot of books being out for it, but they are, like Savage Worlds, there are books that are specific to genres. So there's one that will just say, fantasy. There's one that's going to say horror. One that's going to say sci-fi. So,
but some of these genres are crazy specific, man. Like some of them are setting even.
Yes.
Like there's one called Gurps Mistech. There's like the joke we made is there's Gurps Smurfs, and I thought that was a joke. It's not. There's actually a supplement called Gurps Smurfs where you can play Gurps in the Smurfs universe. Seriously.
Smurf off.
So how the system works is it's pretty simple. Once you have a set of stats created for your character, all your skills run off of your stats. Now there's 3 ways that your skill can run off your stat. It can be either easy, average, or hard. An easy skill, it runs straight up off of your stats when you put points in. An average skill runs off of your stat -1, and a hard skill runs off of your stat -2. So let's use the previously mentioned skill and stat. So agility is your stat, and let's say you're sword fighting, which is an agility-based skill. or dexterity in Gurps' case, they call it dexterity, is a dexterity-based skill. It's an average dexterity-based skill. So if I put my point for my first rank in my swordsmanship skill, since it's an average skill, it's equal to my stat minus 1. So if my dexterity stat's a 14, and I put 1 point in my swordsmanship skill is a 13, stat minus 1. Then if I put up points into give it my next rank, then it adds plus 1 to your current rank. So if I put 2 ranks in it, it would be that point equal to my stat. Let's say I used a very hard roll, the magic roll in this game is called thaumatology, which is your study of magic. Thaumatology is an IQ hard roll, so it takes 2 off of whatever your stat is when you put a rank in it. So let's say your IQ is an 11, so you're an average intelligent person or an average intelligence fighter, and I put a rank in it, then my thaumatology roll is a 9, and so forth. Now, why the number matters is the way Gurps works. You will ever only need 3 dice. You might need more, but you will never need less than 3 6-sided dice.
Yeah, they're only D6s.
They're only 6-siders. There's no special thing or nothing. Only 6-sided dice. How Gurps works is whatever your number for your skill or ability is that you're rolling, you must roll under it. So the lower, the better. Rolling a 3 is always a critical success. Rolling an 18 is always a critical failure. So if I roll my 3-sided dice, let's go back to the swordsmanship skill. Let's say my dexterity is a 14, and I have 2 ranks in my swordsmanship skill, which makes it a 14. So I have to get under 14 to succeed at the roll. So I'll roll, and I rolled 4, a 3, and a 1 is an 8, which is under my 14, which is a success. Then you count the difference between the two, between the target number and your dice. So between 8 and 14 is 6. So that means I have succeeded by 6 points. So what you use with that is your opponent, if he's going to deflect the blow or dodge, let's say his dodge skill is a 13. He rolls his dice, 5 and 2 4s, which is 13. So what did I say it was? 12?
13.
13. So he rolls a 13 or less, but he only does it right on. So he makes it by 0. So that means that since I made it by 6 and he had by 0, I successfully hit him.
So essentially, it's acting as a tiebreaker in case both you and whatever your target is both succeed at what they're doing. This was a way to say, okay, well, yes, I hit you, but he dodged successfully.
I'm just that much better than you this time that I hit you, right? If you meet it, the defender wins.
Okay, so in a case of tie, it's the defender.
Defender wins, yeah. So if I had made it by 6 and he'd have made it by 6, he's the defender. Defender wins. This is how that works. There is a chart if you make it by so much more over him, and you succeed and he fails, it can generate a critical hit and things like that. But that you'd have to get to the meat and potatoes of the combat to see all of that. So that all of the skills run off of this system, all of them. So if you're casting a magic spell and you use your magery skill, right, and you have 6 ranks in magery, which runs off of IQ, so you've got a really good magery skill. You roll your dice. 14. If my magery skill was a 16 total, like if I needed to read a 16, I made it by 2. My opponent wants to resist it. He has to succeed it by 2 or more. So say it's a willpower thing, like an IQ check. I do that, and he has to make a willpower check to resist my charm spell, and I roll the 16. So I made it by 2. So let's say his willpower is a 14. He rolls his dice.
9.
A 5, 3, and a 1. So 9. His is a 13. He makes it by 4. I only made it by 2. He successfully resists my check.
So essentially, if it's you against someone else, there's no set difficulty number. It always varies because So the target number is not fixed. There's no set armor class, anything like that. It's like I roll, and if I succeed, I have to succeed better than his success.
Exactly. And if there's something you need to overcome, like a cleverly designed trap or something, then whatever your opponent rolled on his trap making skill, whatever the dude you're fighting at, if the DM decides that, okay, this is a difficulty 4 trap making skill, in order to spot it, you need to beat it by 4. So you'll use your perception check, and you roll good enough, beat it by 4, you'll spot the trap and things of the sort.
Okay.
And it kind of gives it like a sliding scale of difficulty. So the DM can always make you face things that are your level by giving it stats that are resemble your own. And obviously, there's probably like some type of curve that you can look at. It's probably in the book, a curve that you can look at, see how often certain numbers get rolled on your dice versus something. But like I have a character who's a swordsman, and he's got a 20 swordsmanship skill. So I succeed all the damn time. Like I'm fighting dragons and shit like that, and they're having trouble because I have a 20. So literally anything I roll, I have to roll an 18 to fuck up. I really do. So like here, I rolled a 15, but I still made it by 5. I have a 20. Like that it's really hard for them to dodge.
Unless they rolled really well.
They rolled really well to dodge, but however, Gurps is a very punishing game. Character survival in Gurps is not. If your DM doesn't want to fudge those rolls, character survival in Gurps is really harsh. Like my DM, he doesn't roll behind the screen. He throws his dice down in front of everybody for everything. So sometimes you fuck up bad. Like, I'm not saying his dice are loaded, but I've seen way more 3s and 4s than I'm fucking comfortable with at that table. But, I've rolled my fair share of 17s and 18s. I've rolled my share of 3s and 4s myself. So it's not too bad. But he doesn't like to use the screen. But that's just his style. That's just his DMing style, right? That's what it is. I would obviously be more forgiving as a GURPS GM. I would probably have a GM screen in front of me, mostly to help me with the rules, but to fudge the rules for the most part. GURPS is great. It can get a little overwhelming for a lot of players. I know you can't give it a rating because you've never really played it.
My rating's NA.
Not applicable. But I would give it probably a 3. It's a lot of fun. The options are really there. Like, if you can think of it, you can do it. Like, my first character was basically Sherlock Holmes, and it worked. Like Sherlock from Sherlock. Like, I gave myself abilities that gave me the Sherlock vision, right? Like, my abilities did that. Like, I was just so good at perception that I could look at a room, make a perception roll, and the GM would be like, okay, this means this, this means this, this means this, this means this, this means this. And then I put it all together, and then I could elaborate a theory on what happened. Except I kind of needed a little twist on it because I couldn't just be Sherlock because there could have been combat or something involved. So I'm also an alchemist who has, of course, Sherlock Holmes is, very good at alchemy himself. So I'm also an alchemist who devised a serum that, if you drank it, gave you the ability to be a mage for 24 hours. It gave you 1 rank in magery for 24 hours. And the society my character was in, mages are quasi-illegal. Basically, if you're a mage of any type of talent, the military commissions you, and you have to fly in their airship air force because you have to cast spells to fly the ships.
And I imagine role-playing as Sherlock from Sherlock would have been really easy considering, he's an asshole in real life.
I was a complete fucking tool to everyone all the time. Like, my flaws were I'm callous and I'm insensitive and obtuse and things of the sort.
So no role-playing required.
It was a ton of fun. Like I just insulted everybody all the time. My other flaw though was that I was addicted to the thing, to my formula. I had to have it or else. I was addicted to two things. I was addicted to the formula and to intellectual stimuli. If I didn't do something every day that stimulated my intellect or improved my intellect somehow, I would start getting huge negatives to my perception rules and stuff because I'd be too distracted. I'd be looking for it, and it would throw me off my game, as it were. So that's just one of the things with Gurps. Like my current character, that was my first one. My current character is basically a dude who wants to be the greatest swordsman who ever lived. He's a womanizing, lecherous sellsword who, like, he was a duelist in a law court. Like, basically, it was a style of law where you could demand trial by combat, and he was a duelist, so you hired him to duel for you if you couldn't.
Okay.
You know, trial by combat, that type of thing. So that was his profession, and then he ended up getting magically teleported to a wild frontier type of area where there's like almost no civilization. So this pampered dandy swordsman who's got a weakness for the ladies had to rough it in the wilds for a bit. Got cursed by a demon, by an imp, and long complicated story. At this point, he's going to become the Lich King because he ended up with a sword kind of like Frostmourne. Yeah. Oh yeah, it gets crazy. But that just goes to show you can do anything with Gurps. Anything. Like, it's really, the generic universal role-playing system is not a joke. It's aptly named. But it can be overwhelming for first-timers. I would highly recommend getting a very experienced GM. Like, that's how I got into it. The GM that I got has been playing Gurps since 2nd edition. We're down up to the 4th. So, he's got 30 years of GMing experience. He was a very big help, and like I do not regret it one bit. I even got one of my cousins to join us because we needed new players, and he was like, "Oh, I don't know about Gurps, man," and I was like, "Just give it a shot. Just give it a shot this 1 week. He won't miss it now. Completely fucking addicted. Like, he loves it just as much as I do, if not more." So yeah, I give it a solid 3. It's really good, but it's got a curve to it. It's got a learning curve to it, and it can be a little overwhelming. You need to know what to get. To play Gurps, I'll tell you right now, if you want to get into Gurps, buy these 2 books. The basic set characters and the basic set campaigns. Anything else is just gravy and add-on. The final RPG we're going to talk about is another generic, I wouldn't say generic role-playing system, but it allows for a lot of flexibility, and it's kind of generic. Basically, it's the New World of Darkness. Now, I've covered Old World of Darkness before, but Old World of Darkness didn't have anything like this. In Old World of Darkness, you could play what was called a vanilla mortal, which is just a normal person who happens to be in this world of supernaturals, but you need to figure out how to do it, basically. There was a set rules, and they weren't in any of the core books. You had to basically get like a storyteller's companion, and it would tell you this is how you make a mortal. But the New World of Darkness, or NWAD as they call it.
Just to make sure you don't blow your NWAD.
Old World of Darkness was called WAD, World of Darkness, and this was called NWAD, New World of Darkness. It comes with this core book, World of Darkness. What you do with it is you create a modern-day, normal, vanilla mortal. That's what all the rules in this book are for, just to make a plain, average Joe. And that way, it's very generic. You can make anything. You can make when we did it, I started with just make I wanted to do a Lovecraftian World of Darkness game, but there's no Lovecraftian setting. So I was like, well, we'll just do this, and I'll throw in a madness stat, and I'll just create monsters along the way. And it worked. It worked very well. But our characters ran the gamut from some geeky dude who was in college, or like who plays role-playing games on the weekend, to an ex-soldier who's now like a courier for the mob, or there was Another guy was an internet celebrity. Another person who was just a fast food worker, like just a average Joe. Another person was a homemaker. And you as long as it's in the modern day, you can do it. Now, the World of Darkness is a pretty simple system. The sheet, the sheet's right here, on this side, right here. Much like the old World of Darkness, there are 9 attributes, each with 3. Bring here so you can see it. Each with 3 specialties to them. So the power attributes are intelligence, strength, and presence. The finesse attributes are wits, dexterity, and manipulation. And the resistance attributes are resolve, stamina, and composure. And of course, each of these are in another category that defines them. So all of the mental attributes are, which intelligence, wits, and resolve are together. All of the physical, which are strength, dexterity, and stamina. And all of the social, which are presence, manipulation, and composure, are together. So basically, it's offense, speed, and defense. Basically, so it's kind of like a grid. Then you have a set of skills. You have mental skills, physical skills, and social skills. You can also create your own skills with the DM if you need a specific skill, right? And that's one thing in Gurps too. Like, you can create a fucking skill. Like, if it's not in the books, although with the amount of books that are out there, it's got to be there somewhere for something. You can create it. And it's the same with this one too. If there's a skill that's not in here that doesn't cover it, like there's a craft skill, but let's say you want to be specific. Let's say you want to be a basket weaver, and you don't think the craft skill is going to cover it. Like, you want to be the best basket weaver of all time. You can have a basket weaver secondary skill. You just create it with your ST, and then he'll just, you put stats in it like normal. How World of Darkness works is you have a certain number of dots in one stat, a certain number of dots in another stat. It's a point-based system. You get 5 points to put in one category of attributes, 4 points to put in another, and 3 to put in another. Each stat starts at 1. So if you want to be more of a physical character, you would put your 5 in your physical category. If you're more of a mental character, you put your 5 there, and then you pick your secondary. My trick is to do the minimum, then do the minimum, then do the minimum. So since there's going to be 3 in everything, put your 3 in your mental that you absolutely need. Put your 3 in your physical that you absolutely need. Put 3 in your mental, in your social that you absolutely need, and then move up, and then put 1 more dot in the other, and then 1 more dot in the last one that you absolutely need. So it helps you do it from the ground up. Makes it a little bit easier for you instead of trying to prioritize, and then you're like, oh, I don't have enough dots for this. I don't have enough dots for this. At least if you do it this way, you'll know what you need before what you want. Skills are the same thing. 11, 7, 4 is the point split, and of course you put these points in there, and it gives you a rank in it, which is represented by dots. So you take an attribute and a skill, add the dots together. That's how many 10-sided die you roll. And this game uses 10-siders. Yay, 10-siders. So let's use a combat example. Let's say you want to swing a sword. That would be your dexterity and your weaponry. So you have 3 dots in dexterity. You have 3 dots in weaponry. Add them together, that's 6. You roll 6 dice. The difficulty in New World of Darkness is always a 6. Always a 6. So when you roll your dice, you count how many 6s and above you've rolled. For every 6 and above you've rolled, you get a success. So many successes let you succeed at the roll by so many factors. And of course, if your opponent opposes you with his dodge roll, dexterity and dodge, then the successes that he rolls and that you roll cancel each other out until someone's on top. If you end up with more than he does, then you hit him. If he ends up with more than you did, then he dodges you. And it's really that simple. That's it. Done. The only complication in World of Darkness is sometimes there'll be a difficulty, and the difficulty is set by the ST. The ST will tell you difficulty 2, then that means out of my 6 dice that I roll, I lose 2 dice, so I'm only rolling 4. It could be due to any kind of circumstance. Either the weapon you're using is shit, you're in the middle of a firefight, or I don't know, the other guy's just, you're scared of the other guy and it's intimidating you and it gives you negative to your rolls, things like that. And it really is that simple. Like you have you take hit points worth of damage, you buy merits and flaws, which are kind of like your advantages and disadvantages, or kind of like your edges in a way. So like your merits is like, do you want to be a 2-weapon fighter? Pick your 2-weapon fighting merit. You want to have like a danger sense, kind of like a spidey sense type of ability, pick danger sense. Eidetic memory, there's one really good one called common sense, where if you're inexperienced and you pick the common sense one and your character's about to do something really fucking stupid, the DM will look at you and says, you have common sense on your sheet? Yeah. It says, don't do this, it's dumb, use your common sense, things like that. It's kind of a helper for noobs. So the thing about New World of Darkness, I should say, is it has this core book which you need for every game. This book has all of the basic rules, all of the basic combat rules, and like all of the other systems. But however, what you can do with this is you can then add on the New World of Darkness setting games. So you've got the first one, which was Vampire the Requiem, and they're all really pretty, by the way. They're all like fucking ridiculously nice looking books. So Vampire the Requiem, which is kind of like Vampire the Masquerade, but with the serial number filed off, and they've mixed up the names to stuff. There's still Clan Gangrel, there's still Clan Bruja, there's still Clan Tremere, but they're kind of different, sort of. And it's like Vampire the Masquerade for the most part. The vampires have a secret society that tries to rule the world. And but there's no big old apocalypse thing looming in the background that they're gonna have to put up or shut up at some point. It's just, the game is what it is. Another one, which is probably my favorite of the setting, it's difficult to see because of the silver note lettering there. Changeling. It's called Changeling the Lost. Whereas the old World of Darkness Changeling was more like a fantasy in the modern world, Changeling the Lost is all of the old fairy tale, like the fairies, the tales of the fairies, but the bad ones. In Changeling the Lost, you play a person who, for some reason or another, was kidnapped by the fairies and brought to their realm to be their slave or their servant or their entertainment or whatever. Eventually, you find a way to escape, and one of two things has happened when you finally get back to the real world. Either you have lived an entire life there and only minutes have gone by in the real world, or it's the other way around. Years have gone by in the real world and you were only in the fairy world for a few moments. And then when you get back to the real world, you'll notice that someone has lived your life for you, which is what changelings leave behind. They're called fetches. They're like little talismans that turn into a person, and that person has acts the way you would, has all the memories you have, and everything else. It is essentially, for all intents and purposes, you, until it sees the real you. Once a fetch sees the real you, it remembers it's a fetch and knows that its existence depends on whether you exist. So it will try to fucking kill you any means it can, because it will lose its life, right? It'll lose its existence. And then let's say it succeeds at killing you. It succeeds at killing you. Your fetch succeeds at killing you. You're gone. Your fetch then forgets that it was a fetch, forgets that this whole thing happened, and goes back to its life. Goes back to your life. So it's a really interesting little setting. When you come back, depending on what kind of changeling you were, you gain like traces of them in your behavior. So like if it was like a troll, you tend to come back a little more brutish, a little more stronger, a little more gruff, a little rougher around the edges. If it was like a she, which is kind of like an exotic elf-like fairy, you come back a little more graceful, a little more sociable, a little more like your traits are a little bit. And then depending on what season it was, you have different new features in your changeling form and things like that. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I've been silent throughout all of this because sort of like Gurps, I haven't played it at all. But unlike Gurps, I have almost zero familiarity with it, regardless of the new WAD or the old WAD or any WAD. So pretty much this is the Phil show at this point because I have zero input on this.
But I mean, you can always ask questions.
Well,
you're here to the
You're
other factor.
doing what was you were saying? ST? What's ST?
ST, storyteller. The different games will have different denominations for whoever runs the game.
Okay.
Like in Deadlands, you're called a marshal. In D&D, you're called the dungeon master. In all of the World of Darkness games, both new and old, you're called the storyteller. Because the thing about the World of Darkness games that needs to be really gotten across is they're not meant for big combat. They're not supposed. You're not like there is confrontation in stories. That's part of the story, right? Sometimes
it's much more role play based.
Yes, very much more role play based. It's a storytelling system. Whereas most of the other RPG systems have just GM, Game Master, as a generic catch-all term. So Gurps uses Game Master, regular Savage Worlds uses Game Master, Rifts uses Game Master. I can think of...
Pathfinder uses Game Master.
Does it?
Yep.
Game Master?
Dungeon Master is technically
a D&D trademark.
D&D
Trademark, just like Storyteller is a Changeling, is a World of Darkness trademark, I guess. So, yeah. World of Darkness, again, new World of Darkness, he can't give you an honest rating. I give it a 4 for just World of Darkness, just the core, just this blue book. The system itself. I find that from a system standpoint, New World of Darkness was an improvement over the old World of Darkness. I find the system way less clunky, way less... Because the old system was... The difficulty on the dice roll was variable. Your opponent, your ST would tell you difficulty 7, then that means you would have to roll a 7 or better on the dice. Whereas in this version, he takes dice away instead, or gives you more dice if it's easier. But in the old World of Darkness, if you think about that, if the difficulty goes up, which you are supposed to be better at, you're supposed to be better at something, you're supposed to get more dice to roll, but if the difficulty goes up, like the truly hard stuff, like difficulty 9 and difficulty 10, and you are now rolling 10 dice, you actually have if you look at the curve for this probability, you actually have more of a chance to fail at doing it than succeeding at it by rolling more dice. It gives you because the
percentages of getting
the percentage is working against you,
yeah.
And you should be able to do it easily because you have such a high stat in it,
mm-hmm.
right? But that's why at high levels the old World of Darkness dice system goes what they say kabong. One reviewer I read years ago, the system goes kabong at high levels. It just sucks. It just doesn't work the way it's supposed to. But this one doesn't have that flaw because the difficulty system is based on taking dice away or adding more dice, and it's always a 6. So you'll always have the same odds of reaching something. It doesn't make it more. You don't get more of a chance to fail versus more of a chance to succeed. So that's why we give this a solid 4. Any of the actual settings in New World of Darkness, I haven't played all of them. I own about half a dozen of them. They're all varied. They're all okay. I like Changeling the most because it feels different and really cool. To be honest, Werewolf's kind of boring. Geist was a cool concept. Hunter is overly complex. And Vampire feels like... It feels like a B-movie version of regular Vampire the Masquerade. If you're such a fan of the original Vampire game, and you look at the new Vampire the Requiem, Vampire the Requiem feels like... More like... It wouldn't necessarily even say a tribute. It feels like a B-movie version. Like you know how there was the Transformers movies? And
right.
Then there was those cheap schlock ones called Transmorphers. You remember seeing those in the discount bins? Right? That's what it feels like.
Like a third party.
Like a third party attempt at doing it. But it was official. It was the official new version of the game. I just didn't agree with it. I never played it much. I got more mileage out of Changeling, The Lost, and World of Darkness than I did out of all of the other games. That's why I stopped buying them. Eventually the frugal part of me, the cheap ass part of me was like, Phil, you gotta stop spending money on books you ain't gonna use no more. You know.
Well, any role-playing system, and once it's around long enough, it's going to get to the point where the books are just become taking up an entire shelf.
Especially if they sucked.
Yeah.
Need I remind you about your 4th edition section?
Which is actually almost non-existent now.
Have people been buying them?
No, it's just now it's it got converted over to the use, and some people it's picked up, but this is over a course of 4 years.
Yeah.
We haven't ordered a 4th edition. Like, mind you, there's no more since 5th came out, but when I started at the store in 2012, there was the occasional book during that year, but around 2013, it pretty much was a case of if we sell it, great, because we're not getting any more.
Well, Pathfinder came around then, right?
Well, Pathfinder came around before that. That came around. It came out shortly after.
But that was 2013 was around the time Pathfinder started catching on.
It caught on, I think, around. Actually, it caught on. It came out of the beta, I think, in 2010, because it came out shortly. The beta came out shortly after 4th edition was announced because everyone realized 4th edition sucked, and then it picked up, and it actually got to the point where it outsold 4th edition. Now with 5th edition, they actually, I think they reclaimed a lot of their lost market to the point where I think they're almost to the point where I think they're at the point right now that they are where they were at least with 3.5, maybe if not exceeded. Because I have not in the 4 years in the 2 years that 5th has come out, no one's been trading in used 5th edition books.
Well, no, man, because they're fucking great. 5th edition is good,
and they've been smart with
how they're releasing.
Yeah, like their scheduled releases. I would thought by now there would have been easily a dozen books by now, but there's you have your core 3, and you have a couple of other source books, and that's really it.
Yeah, the adventure paths. Well, I find the adventure paths are basically source books in of themselves most of the time.
Of the world that is taken, like the
well, the thing is they've chosen the realms as their base setting, so it's all Forgotten Realms stuff, which is good. If you want to experience the other settings like Dragonlance or Eberron or whatever, the website has all of it. All of it there. They release periodical online supplements called Unearthed Arcana, and all of them have a whole bunch of extra setting rules. It's like, do you want to run Eberron? Well, here's the rules to create your shifters and your Warforged and all your Eberron stuff. Do you want to run Dragonlance? Well, here's rules for Dragonlance. Do you want to run in the worlds of Magic the Gathering, like Zendikar and Innistrad? Here's your rules.
So we started this for generic, and then we've migrated over to. We are not in the pocket of Wizards of the Coast. I'm sorry. It's just somehow migrated over.
The thing is, here's the hard fucking truth about it. How good 5th edition is. Once 5th edition came out, I stopped buying Pathfinder.
No, yeah.
I haven't bought a single Pathfinder book since 5th edition came out. I've been all 5th edition. I find Pathfinder too overwhelming at this point. I understand for a lot of people, it's very appealing.
That was a system that I think where that is another. There are too many source books out. You have when it first started, you only needed one, and then maybe the BCR if you're running something, which was fine. But they were putting out a hardcover style book almost quarterly.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And whereas really for D&D they've had their source books are yearly, which.
Advanced races, advanced classes,
NPC
codex, things like that. There's just not to mention.
I think 5 B series now.
Not to mention the fucking adventure paths.
Yeah.
All of those have character options in them. All of those have characters options. Plus, since it uses the open game license, other people are publishing shit for them anyways. Anyways, long story short, generic RPGs are great. They're a good way to get into it without getting bogged down by a specific genre or a specific setting. Not everybody wants to play fantasy. Not everyone wants to play D&D. I understand that. But not everyone wants to play a horror game. That's cool too. At least with the generic universal role-playing system, or with Savage Worlds, or, I wouldn't say with the World of Darkness, you're pretty much stuck with a horror game. But it's a generic horror game, right? You can make it anything. You can make it anything you want. It can be about vampires. It can be about werewolves. It can be about the Lovecraftian things, Generic role-playing systems are, if you find a good one, they're really good. There's other ones that we haven't mentioned tonight, like the Cortex system.
Mm-hmm.
That's new. I think that's Monty Cook.
Yeah, because then there's actually like a few of the Monty Cook, like Numenera.
Yeah, it has its own settings as well.
Yes.
But it does offer a specific generic role-playing system in the core book. So you can really adapt it to anything. All you need with that is you've got your sets of rules, you've got your imagination. Make whatever the fuck you want, experiment, play around. The key with any role-playing game, have fun. Do what you want to do, So that's all for today. Like I said, we've talked about the generic role-playing systems. This is all on the table, presented by GameItAll.com, your one-stop shop for all your gaming and entertainment news. Sponsored by Comic Hunter, the wonderful folks at Comic Hunter. Great bunch of guys, like salt of the earth. There's this one dude, though, behind the counter. He's kind of a crank, but, every place has them.
We're open 7 days a week.
They are open
We're
7 days a
only
week.
closed
Most
3
holidays.
days of the year.
Most holidays. It's fucking great.
The only days we're closed is Christmas, Boxing Day, and New Year's.
Mm-hmm.
And even New Year's Eve and Christmas Eve we're open till like 4.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you're someone who gets fucking paid stat days off like myself, and you need somewhere to go just to hang out for a few hours, Comic Con is open. Why not? And comichunter.net is their website. Great deals on Magic singles. They just got a brand new collection in for some really old stuff, some really good stuff that you really should take a look at. You might find some cards that you're needing for your deck. Also, they have a ridiculous back issue comic book catalog dating back to the Golden Age.
We also have a Facebook page, which actually, when we do get a large collection in, whether it's comics, toys, games, Magic cards, we post it, and you can see, all right, we got these in, and you can, if you want, you can message us on Facebook.
You ship internationally, don't you?
US
yes. For sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
We actually have a few things on eBay,
Yeah.
like for comic bundles specifically, and a few toys. But yeah, we do have a presence online, but if you if you like your brick and mortar, you can still come on in. We're not going to turn you away.
Absolutely. Great store. So I'm Phatter Phil, and this is Jeff.
I'm still searching for a nickname. I'll think of something.
We'll figure it out. So everyone have a good night, and hope you join us next week. Next week we will be reviewing the brand new Volo's Guide to Monsters, latest D&D supplement, which is fantastic. And we'll also be reviewing the long-awaited, unexpected and long-awaited expansion to Betrayal at House on the Hill, Widow's Walk. So we'll see you next week.